Well, let me say hello to everyone. Welcome to the Central Florida Computer Society main meeting for August 13, 2023. I attended the premiere presentation of Ron's program on VFib, and I was very impressed with it. We are all getting, it just seems so timely because in my own world, I've run into so many things going on. Hewie, you've talked about your valve replacement. I know a guy he and his wife just came down with COVID just last week. One of our directors has had uh, stents and bypass put in. He's having problems with it. Another director who for years has been fighting with a valve issue. It affected his breathing, and he had a TIA as a result of the valve problem, and it took them three months to actually narrow it down that there was a valve that needed replacement. He just got out of the hospital this past week. I myself had a TIA back in November, was not allowed to drive for 6 months. I've gotten through that. I'm driving. I'm doing fine. It just seems like it's just something we all need to know more about. So when I heard that the new version of smart watches are coming along that will be able to track and report on VFib, I thought that was certainly something worth sharing. So I'm excited about it. At this point, I will thank you, Ron, for making the time to review this, to replay your presentation and then be available to answer questions on it. As an ex-doctor, that's something that we can all learn from. So thank you so much for being here. And at this point, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. Today, I think the video is titled Your Heart and Your Watch, right? Is that the one you're going to play through?
Yes.
Okay. Well, many of you know, but I'm actually a physician and a family physician and looked after seniors for about 30 years. So I have a lot of experience in looking after people with heart problems and strokes and so on and so forth. So I've been very excited about smartwatches. In fact, so excited, I did 19 videos about the health aspects of smartwatches. So I have a lot of videos out there, and the one you're going to play today, your heart and your watch, will is a great one, but it is dated because it was a year ago that I made it, so a lot has changed. So I wanted just to put everything in perspective so that you all are aware of what's happening. So I thought that my view of smartwatches and health aspects of smartwatches is different than probably yours. It's different than the salesman trying to sell you a watch, and it certainly is a lot different than reporters that are reporting on health benefits of smartwatches. And so I wanted to just sort of give you my perspective on this to start with, and you can certainly answer. I'll answer any questions after Hewie plays the video. So I want to look at why you might want to purchase a smartwatch. And I'm going to tell you some of the reasons why you may want to and some of the reasons why you may not. I have some feelings about, so the first thing is fall detection. If you are going to purchase a smartwatch because you think it's going to help you with fall detection, I think actually it's a bad idea. In fact, I think if you use fall detection, it can have a negative outcome on you. So I don't think that's a good idea. And I can explain that later if anyone's interested. Then there's a lot of multi-factor things that happen when you use smartwatches. They do a lot of interesting things like play music, play Spotify, have stopwatches on them, and do all sorts of interesting things linked to your phone and stuff like that. And that has really not really health benefits. And then there are the health monitoring that occurs. And this may or may not have benefits for you. We can certainly talk about that as well, such as you can measure your blood pressure, it does sleep tracking, it does oxygen levels and things like that you can get some instant numbers for whatever you want to do with that, right? But the reason that I believe that anyone over the age of 60 should have a smartwatch, and I firmly believe that if you're over the age of 60, you should be wearing one, is because of the ECG and the cardiac factor on there. And this is more important because of what's happened in the past year, and I'll explain that. So if you go and you look at your the ECG factor on watches, it started way back, of course, with Apple Watch, and using and before Apple licensed it from a company called Cardia Mobile, and this is a little device, and they got in bed with Apple, and they licensed the software from this device into the Apple Watch, and this was maybe about 10 years ago, and they created this device on your watch called an ECG. So an Apple Watch did an ECG. Now, what's an ECG? Like, what's the point of this? Well, over the age of 60, there's two things that can happen. You start to have one or two problems with your heart. Either your heart can go too slow, or your heart can speed up and go too fast. And the incidence of that goes up exponentially after the age of 60. So by the time you get to be 80, you might need a pacemaker, or you might have had a stroke, and there's all sorts of things that are going to happen to you. And the incidence of that happening, as I said, goes up exponentially. So the going too slow is not a big factor, because you can pick that up with any watch. You don't need a smart watch for that. Just set up any watch so that measures your pulse. And if you start to feel dizzy, you feel unwell, you look down and you see your pulse is 50 or 45, you need a pacemaker, period, right? So that's the slow pulse. But then the fast pulse, and when it gets really fast, this can be called atrial fibrillation. And a lot of you have that, or you've had testing for it and all that sort of stuff. So the very first time when Apple brought this out, they brought it out, and and in the first Apple Watches, what would happen is if you felt your heart palpitating or felt a little unwell, you then pushed the button on the watch, and it actually did what we call an ECG, and it told you if you had atrial fibrillation. You might have something else, but there it did. It told you if you had atrial fibrillation, and it recorded that as a PDF file, and you could go to your doctor and say, hey, I felt unwell. Look what I found. So that was pretty cool. And of course, Samsung followed that, and then Fitbit followed it, and Pixel has it, and that was sort of cool. Well, that was all fine, but the next series of software update occurred, and what happened is that probably about 2 years ago, the software changed, and it didn't continuously monitor. This is where everybody gets it wrong. The problem with you having to push a button to decide if you have atrial fibrillation or not is about 30% of people who have atrial fibrillation don't have any symptoms. So how are you going to push the button if you don't have any symptoms? So Apple brought out a system where it would monitor periodically. It monitored your heartbeat on a continuous basis. You didn't have to push the button. It was listening in the background, listening for atrial fibrillation. And so this was really cool. So now it was, and it wasn't continuously monitoring it. It sampled it through the day, and mostly it sampled it at night. So this is why it's so important. If you wear these devices, you need to wear it through the night, because that's when most of this sampling occurs to decide if you have any problems or not. But it didn't do it on a completely 24-hour basis. Well, what happened in the last few months, actually the last 4 or 5 months, is that Apple upgraded the software again, and this is really cool. It now not only does it monitor you for atrial fibrillation on a continuous basis, but it also records and logs the activity that you're doing while atrial fibrillation happens. And it tells you how long you've been in atrial fibrillation and gives you the time frame. And this is, as Stan was saying, a lot of people are starting to get into heart problems, and atrial fibrillation can be a sign of impending heart problem. And so there's a big difference if you're out for a walk and you're exercising a bit and you're doing a walk, however fast you're going, and you get a period of atrial fibrillation. that could mean something totally different than if you have a period of atrial fibrillation when you're sleeping, right? So there's different. So as doctors, we need to know this information, and the more information we can get, is the better we can help you with it. And this new feature on the Apple Watch is really game changing. So I talk about that in this video. So what I'm going to do is let Hewie play the video now, and then I'll answer any questions you have about it. Okay, Hewie, I'll take my I guess I'll take the spotlight off. If you want to play the video.
Yep. Gonna go do that right now.
Your heart and your watch, what seniors must know. There are new features coming to some smartwatches that will make these a must for seniors. In this video, we'll look at what these features are, what watches will be affected, and why it is so important that you as a senior watch this video. It's Ron Brown with Tech for Senior, where we make videos to help seniors understand technology. Today, though, I'm going to take my YouTube creator's jacket off and put on my medical jacket. Yes, I'm going to draw on the 35 years of experience I've had looking after people as a family physician and working in emergency departments. So today I want to talk to you about some significant changes that are occurring to smartwatches that will make these invaluable for seniors. So you need to know what a very common heart condition is called atrial fibrillation. Now in this graph you're going to see, and this is from my very popular Saving Your Life with Wearable Technology. As you can see in this graph that over the age of 60, the incidence of atrial fibrillation goes up exponentially. This is so important for you to understand. Let's have a look at actually what atrial fibrillation is. So in this diagram, you'll see that there are 4 chambers in a heart. There are the 2 upper chambers called the atrium, and there are the 2 big chambers at the bottom called ventricles. So the 2 chambers in the heart at the top, the atrium, contract down, putting blood into the bottom big chambers that pump the blood out. Now the right ventricle goes to the lung, and the left ventricle, of course, is the big one that goes to the rest of the body. So that's how the blood flows through our heart. Now in atrial fibrillation, there's a problem. In other words, those 2 chambers in the top, those atrium, start to speed up. And oh my gosh, they go awful fast. They get going at a rapid rate so that they're just quivering. They're not actually contracting down. Now you're going to say, oh my gosh, that's terrible. You'd probably die. But that's not the case. Most people with atrial fibrillation can live very normal lives. In fact, the problem is they don't even know they have the condition. There's a stopgap between those top 2 chambers and the bottom chambers, so the bottom chambers just keep contracting down. And it turns out that you don't need those top 2 chambers to push blood down into those bottom 2 chambers. So what happens is this, is that atrial fibrillation occurs, and it occurs when you don't even notice you have any symptoms. That's the problem. So the top 2 chambers all of a sudden go very rapid. They're sort of fluttering, and they're not actually contracting down. Now what this does is this causes clots in those big atrial chambers, and the blood clots then can move down into the ventricles. In the case of the left ventricle, goes up into the brain and causes strokes. And that's why atrial fibrillation is the 3rd cause of stroke. So and people don't know they have it. So this is why it's so important that as a senior we understand what atrial fibrillation is, and that there can be no symptoms of that, and you just end up with a disease that you don't want. You don't want to have a stroke, right? So how can watches help with this? What advantages would there be in purchasing a smartwatch? Well, the three that I've talked about before and done a number of videos about are, of course, the Apple Watch, the Galaxy 4 watch, and the Fitbit Sense. Now, why is this so important? Well, these three watches have a unique feature that they can do. Not only can they do what we call an ECG, but they can interpret the ECG and tell you if you have atrial fibrillation. These have all had scientific studies behind them, and all are approved by the FDA in the United States. They're also approved in Canada and many other countries around the world because they have the data to back up how they're doing this. So what happens is these watches can do an ECG. The ECG on the watch gets interpreted, and it will tell you immediately when we do the ECG if you have atrial fibrillation or you don't. So that's pretty cool. It will certainly do that. And these watches work in conjunction with a cell phone. So these watches, of course, are paired with a cell phone. This data is then stored in a PDF format on your smartphone. This, of course, can be shown to your healthcare provider. It can be emailed to your healthcare provider, or of course, it can be sent to your cardiologist. The studies have shown this is very accurate. Now, you must understand that an ECG done on your watch is not like the ECG we do in hospitals. In the hospital, when we do a 12-lead ECG, we can look at the past, present, and future of your heart. It gives us a lot of data. The ECG that we do on these smartwatches only has one specific function, and that is to tell if you have or have not got atrial fibrillation. It doesn't tell you if you have a heart attack. It doesn't tell you if you need to go to the hospital. None of that is true. All as the ECG function does is it tells you if you have atrial fibrillation. So let's look at how this would work. Well, you would maybe get a fluttering in your chest, maybe you get a bit of shortness of breath. You start to feel a bit unwell. You then have to activate the ECG on your watch. So there are many different ways you go about that. You could push the crown, the face. There's a bunch of different ways these watches work, but essentially you have to activate your watch to do the ECG. So then the watch usually asks you to be quiet, seated in a spot, and then you can actually, it will do the ECG for you. It then interprets it and says, hey, you either have atrial fibrillation or you don't have atrial fibrillation, and that you should check with your healthcare provider regarding this. It then saves that, and it saves it to your smartphone as a PDF format. Now, the problem with this is, as I told you earlier, is that many patients don't know they have atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation doesn't always cause symptoms. So if you don't have any symptoms, how are you going to activate the watch to do an ECG? This does not continually monitor your heart and tell you if you have atrial fibrillation. Wouldn't that be great if you could wear your watch and it would continually monitor your heart and tell you if your heart ever went into atrial fibrillation? That would be a game changer. And folks, that is the game changer we're going to talk about today. All right, this is great news. And the continuous monitoring of your heart rate has been approved for the Apple Watch in the United States and Canada. And it will occur later this fall with Watch OS 9. Now, the great feature of this is it will work on the older watches, so you don't have to spend any more money. The watch, the Apple Watch you have now, this will occur on it. It is just a software update. This is likely going to occur with the Fitbit series as well, as there is a big study that is just completing with the Fitbit line to confirm the same. The sophisticated sensors in the back of these watches on the back surface monitor your heart. And with a software change, we can monitor them on a 24-hour basis. This is going to be a game changer, folks. You'll be able to wear your watch 24/7, and it's going to tell you if you have had any history of atrial fibrillation. It's going to track your heart on a 24/7 basis. It's going to tell how long your heart was in atrial fibrillation. It's going to tell us the time, the amount of time it was in atrial fibrillation, and what time of day or week it was most active. This is valuable information for healthcare providers. When I was practicing medicine, this would have been a game changer for me. Because, of course, what we want to do is know is if patients remain in atrial fibrillation after we've treated them for them. Some of the treatment for atrial fibrillation is to get you out of atrial fibrillation, whether it's through surgery or medication. We want you to be out of atrial fibrillation, or if you're going to stay in atrial fibrillation, you need to be anticoagulated. So we need to know what your heart is doing on a continuous basis, and this solves the problem, folks. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. At the American Heart Association in 2021, Google presented their Fitbit study to evaluate atrial fibrillation involving 450,000 people that took part. The algorithm Google used correctly identified atrial fibrillation in 98% of the time. Now, the exciting part about this was that it was done using a wide variety of Fitbit devices, not just the Fitbit Sense. It is possible with the software change that most of the Fitbit line can now continuously monitor you for atrial fibrillation. And we know that around 12 million people in the United States this year will have atrial fibrillation. And this certainly is more prevalent with advancing age, hypertension, and obesity. So it is so important that we identify these folks so we can get treatment and, of course, prevent the complications such as stroke, congestive heart failure. So we expect to see this fall changes in the software to Apple and Google software that will allow continuous monitoring for atrial fibrillation, which will be a big help in the medical management of this very serious condition. In summary, let's look at what we've learned today. The first thing is you now understand the word atrial fibrillation and should know what it is. The second thing you learned today is that it's common, and it's even more common after the age of 60, and 16 million patients in the United States will have a period of atrial fibrillation this year. And 3 is you now know that it is the third leading cause of stroke. The good news is, of course, we have the Apple Watch, the Fitbit Sense, and the Galaxy Watch 4 that have been approved by the FDA and in Canada for the evaluation of atrial fibrillation. And now on your watch, with the click of a button, you can now do an ECG, which is interpreted and will tell you if you have atrial fibrillation or not. But after today's seminar, you now know that a lot of people don't have symptoms with atrial fibrillation. But the good news is coming, because Apple has now confirmed that with Apple Watch OS 9, we'll be able to continually track and monitor for atrial fibrillation on a 24-hour basis. And this will be available on most Apple Watches. You won't have to go and buy a new watch. You've also learned today that Google is following suit with this, and I expect a big announcement since their Fitbit study was done in 2021. I expect probably a big announcement with the introduction of their new Google Watch this fall. This will have the new version of Android Wear on it, and we'll likely see a continuous monitoring as Apple has done. The technology is there. I'm excited about this. I think this is going to be a big feature. Well, it's Ron Brown with Tech for Senior. Just before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody I did the statistics on our channel lately, and I found that only 1 in 10 people are subscribed. If you want to keep updated on your health and get notifications when we make new videos, please click the notification and subscribe. We'll have many more videos about this continuous atrial fibrillation monitoring as it becomes available this fall. Until we see you again, have a great day. So Huey, I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I gave that talk, not that one, but one like it at our in Mesa when I was down there, and at the end I said if anyone wants an ECG with my little portable ECG machine that I have here, we can do that. And there were, to my amazement, 30 people stood in line while I did this. Now, there was one big tall fella came and he was looking real pale. And we took his pulse and it was 45. I sent him to the hospital in an ambulance, all right? And then out of the other 30 people, 4 had undiagnosed atrial fibrillation. So it's common. These are just people at an auditorium where I'm giving a talk, right? So it happens all the time. So open it up for, do you want to do questions now or do you want to do yours first? Or
Yeah, let's see if there's some questions while it's on their minds. Murray, your hand is up first.
Yes, I'm not sure if you got my email message, but there were quite a few issues. I saw this video as you did for Tech for Seniors, but the problem I have is, first of all, I can't see how to share it with my doctor in Canada. Secondly, it looks like you've got to do something to set up the atrial fibrillation to detect it. And I don't see how to get any PDFs, so maybe you can address those issues.
So Murray, I put for everyone in the, I knew you were going to ask that question. So in the chat, I put the reference letter that outlines all those answers. It's a PDF, it's a document from Apple support, and it's all the that information is there. Now, Canadian doctors aren't set up quite the same as the system is in the United States. So it's not easy. So the PDF is stored on your not the watch, but your phone. So you need to email, you need to somehow get that to your doctor, and that would depend on how if your doctor wants to receive it, right? There's a varying difference of opinion. I think doctors are getting trained and better understand this technology, but a lot of them say that's hocus pocus. They don't want anything to do with it. They have their way of doing things, and that's sad, but that is often an attitude that you might get. So it depends on who you're dealing with, but it is stored. The ECG and information is stored on your phone, and it is stored in the health app and it is a PDF. And the link I left in the chat is the Apple document that will tell you answer all those questions.
Marilyn, you have your hand up.
Yes. Does it also record a slow heartbeat?
Yes. Well, it will notify you. Now it depends which watch you're talking. Are you talking about the Apple Watch?
Yes.
Yes. It will know, you can set the parameters that you want, and it will notify you if your heart rate goes below whatever you set is your lower. I would set it at 60. Anything under 60, I would want to know, and have your doctor talk to your doctor about it. You might even drop that down to 50, but certainly seniors don't do well with slow heart rates because it means you don't have enough blood pumping up to the brain. So it is important to know, and the Apple Watch does do that very. And any watch that records your pulse will probably do that. It's a very common thing. You don't need an expensive watch to check a slow pulse.
Thank you.
Stephanie, your hand's up.
Yes. If you are buying an Apple Watch, do you need to have an Apple phone?
Yes. Yes, you do.
Sounded
Unfortunately,
like
all the devices you need. Now, I might just to follow that through. I think it's really important that everyone understands that yes, the Apple Watch needs to be paired with an iPhone, and you would all understand that you can't use an Apple Watch with a Samsung phone, right? I think everybody understands that. Whereas a Fitbit, you can use a Fitbit on an iPhone, or you can use Fitbit on any phone, right? You got to be careful when you get to Samsung, because the health app in Samsung, you need a Samsung phone to pair it with the Samsung watch to use the health apps. So you have to be very careful with that. And I often, people make that mistake where they buy a Galaxy watch and they have a Pixel phone. So it doesn't sort of work that well for the health app. So you have to be careful with that.
I have a Pixel phone. Yes.
Yeah, you have the Pixel. Well, you can't use an Apple Watch, right? That's for
No,
sure.
no,
On a
but
Pixel
can
phone.
I use either of the other once they're approved?
You can't use the Samsung, but you can use the Pixel. You can use the Fitbit. The Pixel Watch probably, but there's a Pixel 2 coming out that's coming out in about 3 months, and that would be the one that I think that it's going to have some better features on it. And I would just hold off until the next Pixel Watch comes out. But you would use the Pixel Watch to pair it with your Pixel phone, or a Fitbit watch would work. A Fitbit Sense would work as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Walter, your hand's up.
Does the new Galaxy Watch have this feature where it monitors continuously?
That's a very good question. I believe it does. You're talking about the 6, the Galaxy Watch 6?
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer to your question is yes.
Yes. There you go. Thanks, Drew.
I was raising my hand to pop that information in.
Right. Yeah. But be careful.
The new 6 does.
Yeah, but be careful, because the real question, Drew, is what Galaxy phone will work with the 6, and what is that? And you may need the Galaxy 5 Flip, or you may need one of the latest Galaxy phones for that to work. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that either, but I do know
Just be careful with that one.
I do know that they did not make it retroactive, so that there's no software update for the 4, for example, that will give you 24-hour monitoring.
Right. Now, the interesting part about it is the Fitbit line. It was amazing. All the Fitbit line, the software was there all the time, and they turned it on. So even people with older Fitbits were able to activate the ECG feature on their watches. So anyway, you'll have to look specifically. Walter, do you have an iPhone?
We have a Flip 4, and we also have a Galaxy S23 Ultra.
So I'm sure the S23 would take the new the 6, the Galaxy 6, the Watch 6. I'm sure it would work. The S23 is a real new phone. So I'm sure that's the case.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. Stephanie, you have another question.
Yes. If you get a negative thing that says that you don't have AFib, but you're over 80 or something, how much do you have to continue to use the watch?
Well, I mean, what they're trying to do is we're trying to identify, do you have atrial fibrillation? Well, they're actually with the brand new software that I mentioned that's going to track how long you've been in atrial fibrillation. There's probably two types of people that will use it. There's the type of people that don't know they're in atrial fibrillation. In other words, and it actually asks you that when you enroll in the system. It says you want to know. There's some people who have no history of atrial fibrillation at all, none, zero, and they just want to make sure they don't get it or don't have it, right? And that's one type of person. The other person with this new updated software is someone who does have atrial fibrillation, but they want to see how controlled it is, because it's going to monitor your heart for a long period of time, for 24 hours, and it's going to give you the tracking history. That is really valuable information, and that's for people who do have atrial fibrillation. So there is now an expanded role for these devices, right? Because they're smarter.
Yeah, Ron, to go along with what she just asked, and it came to my mind while she was asking that, is maybe she's thinking that's the only reason you're going to want to watch, for health reasons, but there are other things it does as well, correct?
It does, but it does. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure that those are reasons specifically to go and spend $400 on a watch. I think the key part of this is the atrial fibrillation issue. And remember, the watch isn't going to tell you if you're having a heart attack. It's not going to tell you to go to the hospital. It's just there that ECG feature is only there to monitor whether or not you have atrial fibrillation. That's it. Right? There is no other thing that it does. It doesn't tell you anything else about your heart. Just do you have or do not have atrial fibrillation.
Dan, your hand is up.
Yes. A leaky valve, I believe, is related to the atrial fibrillation. Did you just now say that the watch will not keep track of how the leakage is going, and whether you need to be thinking about replacing the valve?
The only thing that the watch is going to do is tell you if you do or do not have atrial fibrillation. Now, if your valve is leaking and the heart is getting bigger and it's getting sicker, then it can flip into atrial fibrillation more often, and it can be a symptom of a worsening heart problem. Okay, so if all of a sudden you have a leaky valve and your heart's getting bigger, and all of a sudden atrial fibrillation starts popping up on your watch, then that could mean that you are it would certainly mean you should go and have it checked out with your doctor, right?
Are there any other questions?
It would be nice if you could just have a test and only needed to borrow it for a couple of days or something like that, and then find that no one in your family has had AFib, and none of them have died of strokes or anything.
Right. The only issue is it's an ongoing process, right? As the clock ticks and as you get older, then the chances of it happening go up, as I said in that diagram, exponentially. So the chances at 60 are a certain statistic, but then the chances by the time you get 70 have more than doubled, right? And the chances at 80 it just goes up exponentially. So it is an extremely common problem as we get older. And as I said, 30% of people don't know they have it. And this is where we end up with people who have had strokes, and they end up in the emergency department with a stroke, and they have no idea why they've had the stroke. And oftentimes that's because they had atrial fibrillation and didn't know. So it is, and that's why, if I went around and asked people who had strokes, if you had bought a watch and a phone for $1,500, would you have done that? And anybody that I've talked to and posed that question would have paid thousands and thousands of dollars to have something done so that they didn't have to have a stroke. I mean, it once you have a stroke and you realize the implications of that, you would have paid anything so that you don't have that, right? And I think you have to look at it like that.
I know, but if you're already in your 80s, maybe that curve is not going to get that much higher.
It's going to keep going up. And if you look at Tech for Senior, you look at all the group that we run our Monday show on,
Mhm.
we're all over 70. Well, except for me, I'm 71, but they're all over that age group, way over that age group. So they're all functioning really well. We have a lot of fun, and we plan on doing it for a very long time, right? So what would really be awful if any one of those people had a stroke? It would sort of really screw things up. Right, Hewie?
Yep. and I'm up there too.
Yeah. So,
all right, I've got a 10-minute video on Windows, a program called Everything. If you're not running it, you should. If you are, you might see that it's got something in there that you may not have known about it. I'm going to play it, then we'll have a couple of questions about it, and then we'll call it a day. So let me go ahead, Stan, unless there's something else you want to interject before I do that.
No, I'm fine with going ahead with the Everything. Very impressive program.
Okay. Today, I'm going to show you how to find anything using everything on a PC. I'm Hewie Poplock. That's right. I like to find files quickly. Windows doesn't really give us a chance to do so. I'm going to use a program that I've talked about many times, but I've never really demonstrated in detail. We're going to try to do that today. Using Everything by Void Tools. You use Windows Search or Cortana, you'll find a few files on your system, and then it'll say, well, let's go to Windows Explorer and see what we can find. When you do that and you put in your search, you will find that it takes quite a bit of time. I have 3 screen captures here. The first one about 5 minutes in, the second one about 9 minutes in, and the last one about 30 minutes in when it finally finished. So it takes a long time just to find one term when you're searching with Windows Explorer. When you are searching using Everything, as soon as you open it, it's ready to go and it finds everything within a second. This is the website, voidtools.com, where you can download the installer, where you can download a portable version as well. Let's take a look at a live demo. Let's open up Everything. As soon as we do, it's there. And we can start searching. So let's use the term CFCS to search. And it now has found 1,540 objects. It does the folders first. And as we scroll down, you can see there's a lot of items there. As we scroll down, then we get the files. There's some that are Excel spreadsheets and PDF files and all kinds of files. And we can sort in several ways, and we're going to take a look at some different ways in which we can sort. First, we are sorting alphabetically with the folders at the top. If we click the name, we reverse that. So now we're starting at the Z under the files, then we go to the folder. So we can search alphabetically from A to Z, Z to A. We can sort by the path, and then we can reverse that, and it will do the G and C. And I'm going to talk about how you set that up in a moment. You can do by size. So you can have the largest file at the top. In this case, it's 2 gigabytes. Or you can go to the smallest. Those are folders, so there's not sizes, but then we start at 1K. Or you can go by date modified to the date that I'm recording this, which is the 7th of August. Or you can reverse it and go to the oldest file using the CFCS by folder is 2012. The oldest file by itself is 1998 on my hard drive. Now there's different views you can have. Right now we're looking at the details. You can have medium thumbnails, you can have large thumbnails, and you can have extra large thumbnails. Let's look at different items that you can search. You can search everything, which is what we're set at now, but you can only look at audio files, compressed files, documents, executables, just folders, just pictures, or just videos. Another thing that we can do under View, we can have a preview window. That means if we click this, we see a preview of it. So you can adjust that. But you can also adjust your column sizes so we can have all the information and see it here. You see the ability to change, and it changes very quickly. There's a couple of things I want to show you under Tools and under Options. First one is Folders. I have a D drive, which is an SD card, and G is my Google Drive. So I can search my Google Drive as well by adding it under folders. And I can exclude certain things. I don't want to show hidden files in folders. I don't want to show any system file. And in most cases, when I'm looking for a file, I'm not looking for something. It's going to be either hidden or a system file. If I'm sure that that's what a file is that I'm looking for, then I might want to uncheck those. But I'm going to keep them checked. I'm going to say, oh, it does take a few seconds when you make that. Now it's sorting them. And it's done. So now it doesn't have any of the hidden files or any of the system files. So if I type in Hewie, you will see all of the folders that have Hewie, but let's now search for any video files that have my name in it. And you will see that there are several. They're right there. I want to look at any document that has my name in it. You will see that even documents, if I click on it, I will get, sometimes takes a few seconds for it to load the file to show you the preview. I want to look for pictures, and then I can go back to search everything. Now, let's say I want to find Chromebook. You can see I have a lot of files there. And if I wish, I only want to find on G, I want to look at my Google Drive, and you can see that it shows everything that's on my Google Drive. So I put a space there in the word screen, I will see the word screen and only those items that are on my Google Drive. So people ask, can I search my Google Drive? Well, this is a way which you can search your Google Drive. You're not going to do it from your Chromebook, but you can do it from your PC. Find what you want, know where it is, and then go to your Chromebook and then work with it. Let's look at a few ways that I use everything. First, I want to find some files that I know were in the folder when I was working on Website of the Week. And as I start to type in website, you'll notice that it keeps changing with each letter. And as I continue to type, it found all of the Website of the Weeks. I'm looking for something in 13. So I'm going to come down here to that folder, and it could be even a file where that folder is. But I'm going to find that folder, and I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to come up here to Open Path. I'm going to click on Open Path. It opens up my Windows Explorer to that folder and all of the files and subfolders that are there. Then I can find the file that I'm looking for. I'm looking for a file that I created in a program called Microsoft Publisher. I know all of the files that Publisher creates are .pub. So if I hit the star or asterisk .pub, it will find, the asterisk is a wildcard, so it'll find any file that has the extension pub. So I can come down here, I can find what I'm looking for, and I know that it's that file, or it probably is. I can tell it to open the path. It opens the folder that has that file in it, and then I can pick and choose which one I want to use. Often I lose a file. I might save it and can't remember where I saved it to right after I saved it, or I was clicking and dragging a file and dropped it in the wrong place. Now, how would I find it? Well, let's give an example. I'm going to open up a web page. I'm still on Vid Tools, and let's say I want to find support and everything, and there's something on here that I want to capture. So I do a screen capture. I happen to use a program called Snagit. You may use something else, but this is what I'm using. So we're going to take this information. we're going to tell it, okay, grab it and save it and save as, and we'll say test number 1. And I say save, and I close. It saved it. I close this. I didn't pay attention to where I was saving it. So how do we do that? We'll minimize this. We called it. Doesn't matter what we called it. Maybe I don't even remember what I called it. What am I going to do? I am going to look under date modified, but I know that I saved it as a JPEG. So let's first tell it we want to look for pictures. Now we're going to go to date modified. We're going to sort, find the last one, and there it is right at the top because it's the last picture that I saved. I just click on it. I can look at the preview, and that's what I wanted. And here is where it is. And so I can now right mouse click and open the path. Okay, it's in the articles for the blog. It's for this article, but maybe that's not where I want it. I can place it wherever I want now that I know where it is, and I can even rename it if I didn't like the title that I was using. So very quickly, you can find what you last saved, even if you can't remember the name or where you saved it to. How to find anything using everything on a PC. I'm Hewie Poplock. Great program. I use it all the time. Any questions before we call it a day? Murray?
Yeah, for Ron, I looked at that article and it says exactly what I thought it says. It says you can't set up AF history unless you have been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. So what do I do? Can I not? I mean, is there any way to get any of the history? Like I sometimes get high heart rate notices, but how can I capture that and send it to my doctor?
So Murray, it's two things that you're looking at here. The watch will measure it. There's two types of people. One is no history of atrial fibrillation. So you will not qualify for the atrial fibrillation history because you don't have a history. You don't have atrial fibrillation. So you'll be the person who just uses the regular 24-hour monitoring looking for atrial fibrillation. If you had atrial fibrillation, then you would enroll as a person with atrial fibrillation. And then you would be storing your history of atrial fibrillation there. Now, what I think you're getting confused about is if you're in the first category, you don't have atrial fibrillation.
Or I don't have it diagnosed. I might have it without knowing it.
But you don't have it diagnosed. So yeah. You're the type of person. So what will happen is that the Apple Watch will, if it does pick it up, then it'll say, hey, Murray, you have atrial fibrillation. It'll store that information in your health app in the form of a PDF. Okay.
Okay.
But that's not in the atrial fibrillation history because that's the separate part of it. If you have atrial fibrillation, so
if I ever get it while I'm wearing the watch, it will warn me, even though I don't have that set up.
Yeah, so because you don't have a diagnosis of that yet, then you're in the first group of people.
Okay, but I do get high heart rate notices sometimes.
Well, you can set that. You can set that however you want. There's an alert that you can set, and you can set it whatever you and your physician figure is high. So you might say, well, I'm going to set it at 140, and anything over 140, I'll be notified, and that's very easy to do.
Mine is right now set at 120, but but how can I send when I have those things to my doctor? Because I think he'd like to see them, but I don't know how to send that.
Yeah. I don't think there's any specific way of doing that. I'm not sure. I don't think there's any specific way of doing that. You'd have to, I'm not sure if it documents a high rate. I don't think I'm not sure if it puts it in there or not. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, I can see it on my phone, but I can't see. I mean, I suppose I can do screenshots, but that's
what I was just going to suggest. If all else fails, you can do screenshots. But I would check the software that you're running and see if there's and do a search on that software. It might be storing it somewhere, so you can just get that file.
Well, you can save it as an XML file. Well, actually, as a zip file of XML files. but that's only all of the data, and you can't select any particular part. And it's a file that is extremely hard to read. There's no, so far I haven't been able to find any. There was some kind of software that was available a while ago that was supposed to be able to read the XML files, but that disappeared, and there doesn't seem to be anything now.
Yeah, there's
And Murray, there is a whole bunch of excellent YouTube videos on exactly what you're asking. So again, if you rather than making it real complicated, just have a look at the videos and it'll tell you exactly how to do it.
I've looked about 20 of them. And I found one that helped. If you know one that works, I'd appreciate you emailing it to me.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, Stan, you have your hand up.
Yes. Early on in your presentation, Hewie, you sorted by date. And when you said the newest, it came up with August 7th. And you said, yes, that's the day that I did this presentation. I thought that the premiere was older.
That was August 7th, 2022.
Oh, okay. That had me confused.
Yep, it was a year ago.
Yep, great.
Drew?
I just wanted to let everybody know that after Huey did his initial presentation on everything and introduced it to me, I became an everything person as well. About a year ago, I wrote a guide, a self-help guide on some of the more advanced topics of how to use void tools, everything, and I put that in the chat session so that if anyone wants to look at the article that I wrote to read more in-depth information about everything, they can do so.
Thank you.
I also use it after Huey showed me. I as well use it all the time now, and it saved my bacon so many times. Thank you, Huey. It's a great program. You can't be without it.
Yeah, I have it on my taskbar, and I just click the button, and I find things very quickly what I need. And lately, there's a few things that slip my mind, and it just helps me remember. All right. On that note, Stan, you want to do a wrap up, and we'll call it a day. It's been a nice long day, but I hope everybody got something out of it and enjoyed it. And glad you spent the day with us.
Thank you. Likewise. I appreciate Ron's efforts, and I learned more seeing it again about the atrial fibrillation. And I don't have a smartwatch, and I'm going to wait and see what comes up with it. I do use Android, so I'll have to be careful with that. But that was very greatly appreciated. And Huey, Total Commander had a search function. And that I used to think that was wonderful, but this everything is much, much faster. I appreciate your efforts on that. So thanks everyone for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.